Jira is no source of truth because it's based off human artifacts created by humans and updated by humans. And the same thing goes with the code. The code has always been the source of truth. When I started building agentic systems building systems with agents back in May of last year, I realized at that point, project management tools were going to be far too slow to keep up, right? Jira was essentially obsolete at that point. It's tied by a feature called commit intelligence. So every single commit that your developers work on, every single commit is classified and scored. So you can see here, basically when that commit comes in, not only do we classify it in terms of a rating, based off design patterns, solid principles, dry, etc. It's also scored in terms of time. And this is extremely, extremely accurate. Why domain-driven design alone is a good principle, building the domain model, but you really need to stack domain-driven design with a series of additional design patterns. And I've got a great playbook for how you do integrations with domain-driven design.
You are watching 101 Talks with Sachin Menon, breaking down complex ideas into simple conversations.
Most CTOs today are making critical decisions without full visibility. They are guessing timelines, firefighting issues, and stitching together data from 10 different tools. But what if you had an AI that actually thinks like a CTO? Today, we are not just talking about that idea, we are seeing it live. This is 101 Talks, and today we are joined by Levi Garner, founder of InteliG, building what he calls the AI-CTO. Levi, excited to have you here.
Thank you, Sachin, and very much looking forward to the conversation.
Before we jump in, quick context for everyone watching. Levi, if you had to describe your entire journey from where you started to building InteliG today, what would it be?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, going back, and I'll give a short version. I got into tech heavily in college. I actually come from a family of software engineers. Both my parents were in the SaaS world, successful in the SaaS world. So it was natural for me to get into software and started programming in college, fell in love with it, and then naturally progressed, working with my parents and, building a lot of really cool technologies within the SaaS space, right? And then throughout my professional career, there's a lot of different types of CTOs, right? So kind of fast forwarding from college and becoming in college a really, really great programmer and, you know, relational, into databases, all the foundations. Post college, I really stuck with software engineering. So that was always my passion and focus is building systems. So I spent around a decade, not only building systems, but building engineering teams of 10 to 20. And then in the latter portion of my career, I was doing fractional CTO work under a private equity company. So I was kind of having to manage 20 to 40, even up to at some point 60 developers at a time. And that's where really and I know we're going to get into the discussion, really started to see a need for something like InteliG. But yeah, man, definitely from a there's a lot of different CTOs out there. I'm definitely the builder creative type. That's always been my passion.
You said something interesting, Levi, when I researched about you. Most CTOs are flying blind. For someone who hasn't run engineering teams, what does that actually look like day to day? What are they missing?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give a little bit of context on the background, right, of kind of what a CTO is responsible for. And of course, this depends on the context, right, of what the CTO's role is, how big the organization is, et cetera. But at the core, right, CTOs have been making decisions off the wrong source of truth all along, right? And typically, and what that source of truth has been, and two, their source of truth has been scattered across multiple systems, right? So, for example, the project management tools, right? Like Jira, for example. Jira is no source of truth because it's based off human artifacts created by humans and updated by humans. And the same thing goes with the code. The code has always been the source of truth. but no one's making decisions off of code because it's very hard to pull things out of GitHub. It's getting easier now. Yeah, so that's kind of the sources of truth are fragmented for a CTO. They're across meetings. They're nested within Git. They're in project management tools where humans are creating and updating, and no one ever updates them properly, right? And then they're in there, like I mentioned, the meeting. So they're scattered across all of these tools.
And coming to your baby, your product, give us a short version. What is InteliG and who is it for?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of going off my last point. So InteliG technically falls under a new category of systems being built, which is execution intelligence, right? And what I mean by execution intelligence is, again, as engineering organizations, we are using multiple tools to ultimately execute and deliver the end result to the business or customer, right? So what InteliG basically does is it connects to all of these key systems like your Git, like your meetings. What InteliG, which I'll show you, is your knowledge sources, and then it connects to your strategy, right? Your initiatives, your themes, your vision, what you ultimately want to accomplish. And then what I do in InteliG, what InteliG accomplishes is it creates an execution graph across all of these, very similar to Sachin. If you've ever heard of Palantir, right? I think everyone has. Palantir is a huge for enterprises and government institutions, right? So basically what Palantir does is very similar to InteliG is we ingest all of these key sources. What Palantir does is they create an ontological model on top of that and then allow the end user to basically, ask simple questions or reason on top of that. It's very similar in InteliG. We ingest your Git data, we ingest your meetings, we ingest your financial sources, we ingest your strategy or help you create your strategy. And then on top of that, we create an execution graph and then reason on top of it with Cogniz. So that's essentially what InteliG is in a few
Can't wait to
sentences.
see it live. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's dive in
Yeah, man.
and let's get to the demo and see it live.
And so I can answer any questions too
Yes.
along
During the call,
the way.
we'll have the conversation.
For sure. Let me pull this over here. You can see my screen. Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Perfect. You're seeing InteliG, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. So similar to what I mentioned, right? InteliG connects to four key pillars for an engineering organization. The first and foremost that I'm going to touch on is your code, right? Code for an engineering organization is the general ledger, what a general ledger is for accounting. It's the source of truth, right? So the first and foremost thing that InteliG does is it connects to, and during onboarding, you connect to your Git and then you basically enable um, which repositories you want to sync. And then we sync your Git data up to a certain point, right? So it could be the last 30 days, whatever you would
So
essentially
the
like us to sync back from.
data is
Yep.
pulled from Git.
Exactly. The data is pulled from Git. So you can see here in each one of these vertical slices too, I'm going to take you through, or pillars, code intelligence. You can see I'm connected. This is a demo. And I'll even pull up my live. I actually run InteliG using InteliG, but you can see this Meridian company, right, has connected their Git, right? And then essentially, you can see any sync activity or webhooks that come in from there. So we're pulling, there's an initial sync up front. And then subsequent to that, we're listening to any events, like any commits that are pushed, any pull requests, any releases, and then obviously the delivery of those releases. But what's really, really important here, one of the key foundations, again, and I'm going to jump through these different pillars because they're all
Yes.
actually connected, right? One of the biggest issues in modern engineering organizations today, all engineering organizations, is they're basing the time, right, of the initiatives, and that's the strategy pillar here. So essentially what the strategy pillar is, and I'll connect that source. The strategy pillar is essentially what the business wants to accomplish, right? Every single engineering organization is going to have a vision, right? What ultimately do they want to accomplish? Then that vision is going to be made up of a set of initiatives. So this is a fintech company that I'm demoing here. So they've got PCI compliance they need to do. They need to rebuild a merchant portal, break up a monolith, so on and so forth. And these are all grouped by different themes, right? And then ultimately, those initiatives are going to be accomplished, right, in a series of sprints. So that's what the sprints is here. But more importantly, it's not just to create these. I'm setting this up so that you can actually see this. And what InteliG is, again, it's an execution graph. So once you set InteliG up and it's got an agentic setup, I'll touch on that. And that's a really good point for anyone watching, like the future of SaaS setup. And I'll show you that. Like I have a strong principle that like no user in the AI era should ever have to fill out a form. Like when I was building, for example, InteliG, it was so funny, like even doing Stripe integration, et cetera. I wanted to pass all of that to my agent. So I gave that same capability to technically, you can generate an API key here and set all of this up technically with your agent of choice, Codex or Claude, so on and so forth. So I'll show that. But essentially, this is one of the primary value points for an engineering organization. Right now, if the business asked how much time has went into initiative X, how much time has went into initiative Y, right? It's very, very difficult to actually answer that question. And you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, well, we have this PCI compliance initiative, right? And it's got 141 hours logged there. How did that time get logged? And again, everything in the system is actually tied together. So it's tied by a feature called commit intelligence. So every single commit that your developers work on, right? Every single commit is classified and scored, right? So you can see here, basically when that commit comes in, not only do we classify it in terms of a rating, right? Based off design patterns, solid principles, dry, etc., right? It's also scored in terms of time. And this is extremely, extremely accurate. I use this system every single day when I'm building, right? And I'm constantly modifying or looking at and auditing human effort versus AI effort, right? So you can see for this specific commit, it's saying that it should have took around 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So, and again, that commit is linked, as you can see here. Every single commit is then linked to the respective initiative, right? And that's the real source of truth. And I saw this to answer your question earlier too, that we were touching on. When I started building agentic systems back, or, building systems with agents back in May of last year, I realized at that point, project management tools were going to be far too slow to keep up, right? Jira was essentially obsolete at that point, right? Because I'm building sprints, right? Markdown files, etc. Inside with Claude, inside repositories, everything's moving to the repo. How are we ever going to report to the business on what we're accomplishing, right? And that's when I saw this. I saw this connection. I said, commits are going to be everything, right? Commits, and that's always been the source of truth anyway. So essentially what you can see that we're doing here is we're classifying the commit to, this is actually a key feature. So every single commit that comes in, developers right now would have to think about the manual process right now. You would have Jira with a Jira ticket, they'd have to update the Jira ticket, so on and so forth. And then on top of that, even in GitHub, you would have to classify it as a bug with a label or a feature with a label, so on and so forth. So what InteliG does, it's extremely accurate at this. I would say 100% accurate at classifying whether it's a feature, a bug fix, so on and so forth. So and that's very, very important because again, all this actually, the end user, just so it's very, very clear, I'm just showing you the proof behind the pudding, kind of how the system's wired up. All of this can be answered with Cogniz. So if I come to Cogniz is the reasoning layer on top of all of these key pillars that are actually connected, right? So if I come here, you can see you can ask any number of questions related to strategy, related to your code, related to your meetings, and your finance, right? So if I come into, for example, code intelligence, and I come to quality, I can then ask a question on how is our code quality trending, and it's going to give me an answer right back in terms of
Yeah.
our
Can,
bugs, so on and
can
so
we
forth.
can we get a small real example? A question
Yeah,
the CTO would
absolutely.
ask that
Exactly.
earlier
So
would take weeks to answer.
exactly. So that could be one of them, right? That
Yeah.
could be
Yeah.
one of them.
Mm.
So how is our code, for example, right? So I'll just go through this real quick. So you
Yes.
can see for this specific organization, I'll let it answer. So how's our code trending? 166 of the bug fixes there's been 166 bug fix,
Yeah.
right? Commits out of 1,000, 100 or around 1,000 commits for the period, right? So that's about
Mm,
a
mm,
14% bug fix rate. Which is decently high. And then the system breaks that down by period as well. So 60% in February, 33% in February, at the end of February through March, so on
wow.
and so forth.
This
Right.
is very helpful for a CTO.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can also see it's not just on the bugs because code quality is broad, right? It's also
Uh,
based off of PR quality, right? And you can see there the merge rate's about 73% with 66 of the PRs being rejected. So that's just one example. I was just showing an
uh,
example where it's tied to code intelligence because the CTO doesn't have to come here and then look at this is this is not required. He's going to ask any question that he wants here. That gives kind of a brief overview just on the code intelligence piece and how that ties into. And again,
uh,
any question can be asked across repositories, like what's their bus factor, right? As an example, PRs, has this specific feature been shipped yet? So
uh,
on and so forth. I'll jump into all of those questions, but just to jump into another pillar, which is
uh,
knowledge. This is a very, very key pillar. And I'm actually going to I'm going to explain the full loop of
mm,
this. So engineering teams spend a lot of time on calls, right?
yes.
Every single day we have sprint plannings. Every single week or 2 weeks, depending on your sprints, you have sprint planning, so on and so forth.
Stand-ups. Yeah.
Stand-ups, sprint plannings, business meetings, and I'll even tie this exact example to a process that I built a feature out of, and for. So there's a ton of key decisions and action items in all of those. And again, going back to one of my key theses, Sachin, is that teams are moving so fast that we do not have time. Let's say, for example, we're in a sprint planning call. Okay, how many action items came out of the sprint planning call? 10, 20, 30 at least.
Mm,
Every single daily stand up,
yeah.
10, 20. Again, all of these action items are being talked about, and then a human has to go create those action items, right? Which is a real pain, right? And then a human has to not only create the action items, they have to update the action items. It's a complete loop, right? And then they forget
Mm,
to update the action items. And then the developer's just like, just let me go code the thing. Let me go build it and ship it. But again, it's still important to report to the business where we're at on things. And that's ultimately what knowledge accomplishes. So what we do is we connect to your key knowledge sources and ingestions. Fathom right now, that
okay.
we've got a handful of beta customers on Fathom. That's why I connected that. But the way I built the system is anyone that comes on and wants to be a part of the system, I'll add the source. It's very easy. I'm really, really big on design patterns. So our system's built with integration segregation. So we'll connect your knowledge source and will automatically suck in all of your meetings. And that's what technically these artifacts are. So you can see I've got 25 for the org. If I had any private meetings, they would show up here. I've moved all the private to org level
Yeah.
meetings. But if you have a one-on-one with an employee, that's going to show up under my private, and it's not going to show up under organization. So no one else is going to see that. But what the system does, and this is really, really key, this is what in InteliG we call signals. That meeting comes in, Sachin, and we automatic whenever you sign up for InteliG, we automatically take that meeting and then we push it down into a repo that we create and clone and put into your repository as a repository within your GitHub called InteliG Signals. Okay, so that meeting, that daily sprint, or sorry, that daily stand up and that daily or
Mm,
the
yeah.
weekly or biweekly sprint get pushed down into the code base. But what's more important than that, we automatically extract the action items, right, and the decisions from them. And then whenever your developers code, we automatically close out those action items for you. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. But more
Yeah. Yeah.
importantly, what it's a key, it's the this is the future of teams building with agents, because what I was seeing as a fractional CTO is like, okay, everything that we talked that we were going to do is in that transcript. I need to get that down to the repo and then go execute off of that. And that's a
Uh,
key piece to knowledge. So you can see specific, and again, the way this system is built as an
uh,
execution graph, it's built in such a way that users never have to go manually do things. The system's reasoning on top of it, and it's constantly closing things out for you, seeing where you're at, giving you updates, et cetera. So if I jump into a sprint, for example, you create it, And then you come into initiatives, you can see exactly what's been accomplished on those initiatives, commits, PRs, et cetera. But jumping to the action items, I just want to jump to that. You can see here all of the action items from our sprint planning call are put into that sprint automatically, right? And then
There's
whenever the developers commit, they're automatically closed out.
no need of Jira, right? Once we have InteliG with us,
One
it's a complete
100%.
architecture, complete
Exactly. And that's what's really
architecture for the CTO.
absolutely, man. And what's really you nailed on something there is, and that's where like when I define what InteliG is, it is an execution intelligence system, right? So it's execution intelligence, but it also is an operating layer for AI first organizations. And hopefully you can see that. This is the future of building systems where
Fantastic.
a system's listening to what's going on within your it actually understands what's going on within your organization, right? And it's intelligent enough to know when your developers commit things or things get talked about in meetings, right? They get followed up with, completed automatically, so on and so forth. So
Wow.
yeah, that's the knowledge piece. And again, your sprints are extremely the way the sprints are set up, they're set up for based off facts. That was another thing that I was getting really, really sick of. It's like in these daily stand-ups as a CTO, even in your sprint retros, oh yeah, I completed X ticket. Again, it's a human artifact. It's not based off reality. So
Yeah.
you can, at the end of your sprint, you can come here, right? And then see exactly who did what in the sprint. Because engineers in the end should be building systems. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And as you can see here, if Diana's pushing 6 commits, right? If her
Yeah.
volume's extremely low, PRs, reviews, et cetera, her hours, her coding time is only 3 hours this sprint. So what else is Diana doing? Right. And again, all of this is again tied to the commit intelligence feature. But again, all of
Full
this can
vis-
actually just be, yeah,
full visibility of your team, right?
absolutely. Full visibility of the team without having to manually do things and asking them to do things. The only thing developers and engineers should be doing in the agentic era is building systems, being creative, building systems, and, pushing the business forward on whatever they want to achieve.
This looks simple on screen, but was actually insanely hard to build, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think too, I think building anything obviously comes down to what's your technical ability. Obviously, I think in this era, the technical barrier is somewhat lowered. But also on top of that, I think it comes down to domain expertise. And you had a great conversation on AGI. And I really see the future of AGI being hyper focused on domains,
Yes.
right? Where, to build generalized intelligence, I really think it's about building domain specific intelligence. And that's really what I'm trying to do and to continue to push forward with InteliG is connecting to more sources for the engineering org. I got features coming for infrastructure intelligence that are coming and really putting the pieces to everything, putting all these pieces together and most everything is already there. As you can see, I didn't even get into to finance yet, which gives you ROIs on your
Yeah.
developers meeting
Let's take a quick
initiative.
peek at that finance.
Absolutely. So what you essentially do, and this is extremely easy to set up, you create basically a budget. As you can see, I have a budget here. And a lot of times you have to do this anyway as a CTO at the beginning of every, year, you'll create a budget. What's our labor budget for the year? And then based off of that labor budget, again, everything ties back to code. We're determining how much your developers are actually contributing. And this was a major gap I saw across, and that's where I do not want to mistake. InteliG falls in a very, very unique category. It's a very, very unique category. Oftentimes, people compare the closest thing to compare it to is a field called engineering intelligence. But the problem with engineering intelligence programs out there is they're based off of like simple DORA metrics. And as a CTO, I'm every year having to do things like stack rankings, right? What's our return on investment of this developer? How many commits did they do? How many PRs did they do? how well are they adopting AI, right? Well, the only again, going back to the source of truth, the only place that you can find that is in what? Your Git,
Commit.
right? That's the
Yeah.
primary ingestion source. So if I go down to contributors now, and you can see a complete ROI on every single engineer. So
Wow.
basically, number one is their costs, right? Because you could have an engineer that's extremely productive, but they're costing you $500,000. And then you could have a
Uh,
contractor that's, 50K, and they're giving you the same kind of output and the same kind of quality. So that's obviously factored into the cost at 40%. And the other one's based off their output, right? And one of the key ones I just want to focus on just quickly there is the intelligence, right? You can come in here and you can see what is this developer spending the majority of their time doing. You can see he's spending
Perfect.
the majority of his time building features, right?
Mm.
Bug fixes, so on and so forth. But again, I just want to emphasize I've been showing the system a lot, and this is really just proof behind the pudding. All of these questions can not only be answered, but there's deep reasoning and detail, all the detail you possibly could ask for from Cogniz. So I could ask, who has the highest ROI, and it's going to
Oh
give
yeah.
me that
Yeah.
and more, right? So any of these questions can be answered by Cogniz.
Yeah.
It's going to give a
I-
breakdown
I- I-
here
Yeah.
for it.
If I want to look at a detailed charts, I can have a look, or I can even ask here and get the detailed report. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's where I really tie it in because all of these pillars, again, basically feed Cogniz, and Cogniz is reasoning. And what's really cool about Cogniz too is you're not just asking a question, right? And I know that was a question you outlined and you asked me about earlier, which was, we're classifying intent here, we're determining
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
correct execution path, and we're actually storing memory and reasoning over memory. So every single question that you ask Cogniz, it gets smarter. Just want to point that out. So you can see we got a complete breakdown of Ravi Krishna there, and then we could ask any follow-up from there. But just to
Wow.
highlight a couple more kind of key questions CTOs would ask, like, what is the progress of the initiatives this quarter? That would be a very, very difficult question to get across. You would have to go across multiple sources, and more importantly, the CTO have to be so plugged in to the business, right? He would have to be in daily stand-ups. He would have to be in these working sessions, these sprint plannings, to really have the context that he would need. He could simply come in. He could simply plug in InteliG, and from there be able to really ask any question
Yeah.
that he
Yeah.
has related to his engineering work across strategy, code, knowledge, finance, etc.
So this is a complete architecture. Me and my audience, I think we get a gist of it. I think CTOs who are watching it will be really fascinated by this because the huge time of the work is reduced using this.
Yeah, absolutely. You really hit it on the nail there too. I mean, it's actual truth. I think that was something I was always really seeking, was that it always felt like it was like when I was trying to come up with where we're at on initiatives, it just, every other department in the organization has solid facts, especially sales. Like, you always know in sales,
Yeah.
what's your return on investment for a
Yeah.
salesperson, right? How much revenue did they bring in? What's their
Yeah.
salary? That's their return on investment. And it should really be no different for engineers.
Engineers. Yeah.
Right.
True.
Like, what's that in engineer salary, right?
Mm.
What did they bring in? And then what's our return on investment there? And the same thing goes for initiatives. Like, what are we actually, we say we're working on this initiative, right? And you can see this
Uh,
has been 99% verified from
uh,
commits. How
uh,
much time actually went into that from a building perspective, and how much did it cost us? So that's the execution graph here. You can see strategy,
yeah.
how much meetings we've had on it, our code related to it, all the action items derived and completed from it, and our overall cost for it. And again, all of that can be reasoned. And you saw that here with our initiative analysis. So
This is good.
I wanted to show you this. I thought this was real cool. Again, something I think this is the future. And
Mm.
technically, even with Cogniz not only reasons on top of your system, it can actually go and do things, right? So, like,
Uh,
let's say you wanted to create your initiatives, right? Well, I've already got those created in Jira. You could simply paste it, your a screenshot of Jira initiatives into like a chat GPT or a Claude, whatever, and then say, okay, well, to create the initiatives in InteliG, I need it in this format. So you then copy that, you give it, and then you literally just paste that into Cogniz and it creates your initiatives. Or my preferred method is I think this is the future of SaaS systems is agents
Mm.
setting them up if there's any setup. Because again, this system's once you set the system up, you just literally it's this simple. So you can generate an API key, and then our documentation, we've got a detailed API reference. So you could literally just paste this documentation to the agent. It's going to understand exactly how to call the
Mm.
APIs, right? Then if I
Mm.
come back to here, you create an API key, right? Select all, and then give it a name like Claude, right? And
This
I'll create
this
an
was
API
one of
key.
the irritating work what developers or CTOs used to do, right?
Absolutely. Like manually creating things is so annoying. So you could copy that. Because if you think about it, your agent has all the context on your initiatives, right? You're working with your agent, ChatGPT, or not ChatGPT, but Claude, right? You should be iterating. And that's another point I didn't point on.
Mm.
Strategy actually gets pushed down into your repos too, but no
Mm.
problem there. I'll touch on that later. So you generate an API key, then you come to your agent here, and then I have
Mm.
detailed prompts for all of these. So you can just come into here for strategy setup. You literally just copy this prompt, give it to your agent, right? And then it will create your vision for you. It'll create your themes, your initiatives, so on and so forth. So you can iterate on what you want to accomplish as a business with your agent, and then you can simply push that into so you don't have to actually come here and then manually create any of this, right? All that can be done for you with your agent. And the same thing too. One key question the audience will probably have is how
Yeah.
does InteliG connect your strategy to your initiatives? And that's through a feature called code linking. And you can do the same thing with your agents, or you can do the guided setup. I prefer the agent mode. But essentially, what you have to do and this is maybe for a future discussion is you
Yes.
basically the way I build these systems is I bring all of my works all of my context, so let's say you have a front end, a back end, a mobile, a website, and so on and so forth, right? I bring all of those into a shared workspace called InteliG, right? And so my agent Claude has full context on my entire on
Mm.
all of my repos, so you literally just give this prompt to as long as you have your code base opened up in a kind of like a mono repo, right? All
Mm.
of your workspaces added. You
Yeah.
just pass this off to Claude and it will take care of the rest for you. It will do a deep analysis of all of your repositories. And let's say you're working on a QuickBooks integration and the QuickBooks is a repo in itself. Well, we know any commits related to that microservice on the back end, QuickBooks, should be linked to the QuickBooks initiative,
Mm.
right? And this is very, very very, very thorough. And like I said, as long as you're using like a Codex or, Claude, it's very, very easy to set this up. And again, the agent prompt takes care of everything for you. And that's where I think SaaS really breaks. That's where like when I built InteliG, like when you go through onboarding, I ask you no questions, right? Like that's something that really, I think really makes or breaks systems is like getting onboarded quickly and getting value and setting up because SaaS that requires really, really heavy setup, right? Again, if the value proposition is extremely high, okay, well, maybe the user will go through it, right?
Mm.
But I think, moving again, as we push further into the agentic
Yeah.
era, and the AGI era, I think yeah, it's going to have to be both easy setup, high value, right? Those are the systems that are going to survive. So
So, true. True. Good. So let's close this demo and let's have few discussion with the founder, Levi as a founder.
absolutely.
This is awesome product you have built. So CTOs started using this or it is still in the beta stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a strong set of beta users. My goal is to get to 10. Right now,
Uh,
I've got a handful of CTOs using this every day. So
like I discussed with you earlier, we have seen best part of it. It looks simple on screen, but it is insanely hard to build. What's been that one phase in this journey where you genuinely questioned whether to keep going?
Solos. I built it
Oh my God.
by
Okay.
myself. Yeah. And I think again, a big part of it did come from the fact that like obviously pre this, I've been a builder. I really pride myself
Mm.
on architecture and I'm a definitely a disciple of Eric Evans and domain driven design. I don't know if you've heard of DDD or I'm sure a big part of your audience has.
Yes. I have
I'm
seen a post
huge.
on DDR.
Yeah, I'm huge on DDD. I'm huge on CQRS, Greg Young. These two, really shaped me as an engineer and as an architect and as a CTO and event-driven systems. So I'd been building systems. Basically, for me, it was, and I kept getting better and better and better at working with the agents. So I came up with my own and I'm going to actually open source this or for anyone that signs up. I came up with my own methodology for building SaaS products or AI products. So, and that really, really helped me. As I was building this, I was refining my approach because everything with these agents comes down to context. Every single time you spin up a new window, right? The agent has no idea of what's going on with your product. So I came up with some really, really cool work trees along the way. And now anytime I start, I literally I claw dangerously skip permissions every time, and then I click start. And basically, whenever I click start, I have a work tree, and Claude goes through my entire work tree and catches itself up right on my entire project. So if I would have had those things at the beginning, I probably could have done it, much faster. But obviously, a
Okay.
system like this is not something you can vibe code on the weekends. It takes agentic engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, 3 months still is insane, but you did it. And coming to the context for my students or audience, from the thread, what you have told, right? A lot of people watching this are students or early engineers. What's the one skill they're underestimating if they want to build things like InteliG?
Yeah, I think the number one skill, engineer or anyone could really apply, and I replied to an X thread on this is first and foremost like I don't believe you necessarily to build really great systems today have to go through like the traditional path that I went, where like you actually understand what programming is, right? You actually know how to write functions, you understand variables, you understand session memory. These things are really, really important, right? But I think first and foremost, it's really about understanding first and foremost the need of what needs to be built. Like I built this product because I saw a real need because I was struggling with this as a CTO, right? So number one, I think anyone out there that wants to build something that there's a need for, and then the approach in which you take to build it, don't vibe code. Instead, what you need to do is study the basics of building good systems and then become a great prompter to build that system, right? So think about things like an architecture MD, right? Think about generating plans, right? Think about, okay, well, how should I approach this from a database perspective? And then along the way, be curious about the code that's being generated. Right now, I've given everyone a cheat code. The system you build, you can literally have ChatGPT generate, you can generate prompts to then pass to Claude, or you could do it with Claude that you want to build a DDD system with CQRS and event sourcing. That alone will build a better system than 99% of the people that are vibe coding on X today, right? So
Can you
yeah.
explain to my younger audience DDD?
Yeah. So basically what domain driven design is about, right? And this is really applicable to enterprise organizations. So typically when we build enterprise apps, right? And I'm talking CRMs, accounts receivable, accounts payable, business systems, right? Enterprise systems, things that run the government, things that run the biggest, think SAP, think of these big systems, right?
Yeah,
Enterprise
yeah.
systems. The most complex problem in those are not the same problems that, for example, Meta faces, right, for Facebook or Instagram. The biggest problem those systems face are scalability, right? In enterprise systems, the biggest challenges we face are complexity in business logic. Things like an invoice for example, become extremely complex, or a payment become extremely complex. So what domain driven design basically aims to do is to model the problem, right? That's why it's called a domain. Think of a domain as a domain object, to model the problem and then build really good structures around it. And that's why domain driven design alone is a good principle, building the domain model, but you really need to stack domain driven design with a series of additional design patterns. And I've got a great playbook for how you do integrations with domain driven design, right? Another one is a structural pattern, right? With like facade with DDD, or you may use CQRS, command query responsibilities. So domain driven design is just a principle, basically saying enterprise systems are extremely complex. Let's model the problem, right? And not code the problem. So, what a lot of people or a lot of engineers do is they create the entity, how we store the thing in the database, and then they create a thing called an API and a
Yes.
service. And then they program off the entity and the service. And that's extremely messy. That's how you get spaghetti code. What you want to do is you want to
Yeah.
model the problem, right? Think about
Uh,
like building a game, right? You want to
uh,
model the problem, then you want all your behavior to be in an object. And then you
uh,
can let your code, your application layer code, be extremely clean, especially like I mentioned, if you stack it with other design patterns. So literally, that's a cheat code, guys. If you go study design patterns, right, and then you just prompt your agents to build things with clean design patterns. So every single, you know what my favorite command, Sachin, is after I build something? I literally just prompt Claude. I said, if you had more time,
uh,
to work on this problem, how would you clean the code up? Right. That's
uh,
a cheat code right there. That's another cheat
yeah.
code for everyone. Literally, it will go back and make the code even cleaner, even if you've had it prompted with these. And what you'll actually need to do, these are basically called skills now. Before skills became popular.
So, Levi, let's zoom out and let's get into rapid fire. Quick,
Absolutely, man.
quick questions, quick answers. Tool you use every day.
Without question, Claude Code, Terminal, typically within anti gravity or Cursor. I do not have a Cursor or anti gravity license. I just like to use those to run my Claude Code in the terminal so I can see my files.
Greenfield build or legacy code base, which teaches you more?
In today's age, without question, greenfield.
Most overrated startup advice.
I know this is going to be a little bit controversial, but I say building an MVP, because MVPs today, honestly, won't mean anything, because people want an actual system that's going to solve their problem. And an MVP for me, and this would have been commit intelligence, I would have had it done in a weekend, but I had to bring everything together. So,
This is controversial for sure.
yeah,
Uh, one book that shaped how you think about software.
definitely Eric Evans, domain driven design.
Biggest technical mistake you have made as a CTO.
It's a really good question, man. I would say thinking I need that adding more engineers is going to solve the problem faster, without question. A lot of times it only slows you down. And that's where if I would have had InteliG, it would have been able to tell me what my engineers are actually producing if I should add one more developer, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you wish you knew at 22?
That
Did it?
AI, yeah, well, I knew, well, yeah, that actually did come at 22. I was luckily
Yeah.
earlier because I got into these enterprise systems and I was like, these things are a mess. How do I make these things clean? And I discovered DDD on Stack Overflow, which is now dead. But
Okay.
what I would have loved to know at 22, honestly, is was that AI was going to be what it is today, right? I didn't anticipate I knew AI was coming, right? Even when I was a
Yeah.
kid in 2012, like a college student, I was studying some AI, but I had no idea what they were really building in the
Yeah.
labs, for sure.
I knew AI is coming when I was watching Terminator, but we never knew how it is coming.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Levi, last question. See, there's someone watching this right now. They have an idea, but they're hesitating. What would you tell them?
Yeah, just go build it. Go build it. If it's building something, just take the risk. Have fun with it. You're gonna learn a lot along the way. To be honest, I learned more building InteliG in the past 3 months than I did as a CTO in 5 years. Seriously. Like you're gonna build a serious relationship with whatever agent you're working with, and you're gonna learn how to better prompt. You're gonna learn how to build whatever it is that you're building. Just be persistent. That'd be the advice I would give.
Yeah, that's a nice way to close the conversation. Levi, this was powerful. Not just the idea, but actually seeing InteliG in action. Thanks for breaking it so honestly. And for everyone watching, this is what the future of engineering leadership actually looks like. Thank you, Levi.
Thanks so much, Sachin.